Proper preparation prevents poor performance. If you're an athlete or you watch sports, you may have heard that phrase. We're tying everything together today in our Navigating the Retirement Risk Zone series of videos. And the key element of today's video is that proper preparation prevents poor performance. If you follow along, we've been working through 5 modules of how we go through a retirement planning process so that we can create levels of confidence and optimize retirement income and ultimately help people make better choices with their retirement. Today's final module in Navigating the Retirement Risk Zone is managing the system long term. And all of this ties back to the idea that we need some kind of system in place that helps give us a decisive way to make good decisions about our finances and ultimately our retirement, and do this on a long-term ongoing basis. Now, if you've watched, we've gone through 4 modules already, starting with some kind of a financial assessment that gives you a health history or a financial health history from which to make good decisions. We've also worked through how we construct the retirement planning action item prescription, or the set of retirement planning action items that will be most impactful in our plan. We've then talked through how we implement the actual prescription, do that heavy lifting of retirement planning, because as I said in those videos, there's no benefit to seeing a higher Monte Carlo score or a higher cash flow score in a financial plan. That's just like playing a video game. What really matters is how we execute on those things in real life. And then last video, we talked about how we set up a feedback loop, which is really the process of documenting and keeping track or record keeping of what we say we'll do, so that we can then improvise and adapt to changes that happen based on things that are outside of our control. And today we're going to wrap all that together by interpreting the things that we track and then turning those into action items that we can then use on an ongoing basis. And I'm going to set the stage here by talking a lot about behaviors, because ultimately retirement planning is kind of a 50-50 split between financial decision-making and behavioral decision-making. There's both a science, which is the math part of financial planning or retirement planning, and then there's the art, which is how you integrate your own values, your own personal decisions, and your own temperament into the planning. And we're going to talk about that today, because managing the system long-term is a long-term project, and it requires a deep understanding of what's going to drive the decision-making. So the first thing I'd like to say is proper expectations lead to lower anxiety levels and ultimately better decision-making. And you can think of this kind of like a Wile E. Coyote versus Roadrunner situation. When we are ill-informed and don't have enough data, we make impulsive decisions out of fear, or we just make no decisions at all and we just close our eyes and hope that something will work out our way, which is both of those are unlikely ways to succeed long-term. In this scenario, Wile E. Coyote is impulsive. He's just constantly taking action out of a position of just emotion. And Roadrunner is decisive, right? Decisive is where you have a firm understanding of what the things around you may do. You have understanding of your own behaviors and your own skills, and you play to those skills and strength. And what we're doing with this whole system is we are setting up a decisive system so we can make good decisions. And ultimately, retirement planning is kind of like a Russian nesting doll, this image on the screen, which is you start by doing your assessment and even building some action items. And then there's just like this spawn of more and more and more and more stuff that you could possibly do. All the 4 layers we've done so far help you organize and prioritize those things, help you understand the financial impact, and even evaluate your own personal preferences over what you'd like to do versus what you think you should do or what people tell you should do. But because it is kind of like a Russian nesting doll, we need this long-term system to constantly evaluate and then reprioritize and adjust. Evaluate, reprioritize, and adjust. And for that reason, I'm going to show you how we think about the long haul here. And so when you start with retirement planning, you go in this early stage here, you assess your health, your financial health, and then you start making a prescription. And this is like a high volume period of time. There's a lot of fast moving stuff, a lot of education. There's a very steep learning curve. It's both exciting and scary because there's all this new stuff and it all feels very impactful. There's a high marginal return to all the different actions you could take, especially if you haven't done a lot of planning in the past. You're going to be very sensitive in a good way to these different financial activities, and they'll provide, big bang for your buck, high-level returns to your finances. But what happens is eventually we escape this early stage and we have to move into this intermediate stage, which is now on the screen, where we actually execute and implement. We don't just do the planning and understand the financial impacts, but we actually do the dirty work, right? We shift asset allocations, we change spending behaviors, we set up every dollar. That's the dirty work, right? The grunt work. And while you're doing that, what you're doing is you're going through a cycle where you implement stuff and then you document it, and then you implement more stuff and you document it. The volume of work kind of slows down a little bit here, and the emphasis shifts a bit from education to execution. And the priority really here is decisive execution, because you've hopefully done a good job in the early stage of educating yourself and running through the models. And then from here, and this is what the crux of this video will be about, we're moving into the long-term stage. And the long-term stage goes on into perpetuity, forever. And this is a stage where you monitor things on an ongoing basis, you adjust them, and then you document them, and you keep doing that as a feedback loop into perpetuity. And now you can see the whole process mapped out on this screen here, and it gives you some perspective. And the reason to set this expectation is because you're going to feel a lot of adrenaline and a lot of impact in the early stage. And that's going to die off over time as you kind of desensitize and you do more planning. And that's a good thing, because the adrenaline just gets you moving across the starting line, but you don't want adrenaline fueling all of your decisions long term. That's a place of anxiety. It's a place of lack of information, and it will lead to impulsive decisions. We want that adrenaline to subside over time, and we want to think about this as a long-term mechanism. So if we think about this as a long-term plan, and you connect this video to the prior video where we showed the financial plan report card and the series of things we track and why we track them, now we can make this tactical. See, long-term, you're going to need to track specific items. And what you need to do is you need to have a frequency for tracking those things. Then you need a frequency for how often you'll adjust things based on what you track. And they don't have to match. In fact, most cases, they won't. Just like if you weighed yourself every day and then you suddenly started changing your diet every single day, you would not lose weight, nor would you feel good. You have to track things oftentimes more frequently than you adjust them, and you need to track them and be patient and only adjust when you have enough data in order to make good decisions. And so that's what this chart here shows. We have a set of simple things that we track that are highly impactful. In fact, much more impactful than using just our portfolio value as a measure of our financial success. And here we have the actual method that we use internally for how often we track something and then how often we adjust. Now, obviously, if there's a crisis, you adjust more frequently. But the point here is to have expectations in line with your behaviors. And if you don't have those expectations in line, we're going to, again, resort to impulsive decision making. So let's go through these pretty briefly. Our two main metrics that we track are income and expenses. We track those monthly. And the reason we track those monthly is they determine all of our cash flow action items and ultimately determine portfolio construction strategy. They also determine our required rate of return. And you can see that on the screen here. If you start at the top, these two are the most important. Below that, it feeds into the data points that are required cash flow in order to feed into. And what we do with income and expenses is track them monthly. We adjust them quarterly, because sometimes income and expenses smooth out. They're not linear. You don't have the same exact income or the same exact spending pattern every month. But if we make an expense worksheet at the beginning of the year, let's say, and you find that averages out over the year to be roughly what you need, and you can actually live that way, it's okay if spending is not in line perfectly every month. And you'd harm your plan if you saw one month where you overspend by $1,000 and decide to suddenly go, fruit ninja, slice and dice your whole plan just because you got panicked about that 1 month, which is why we set the expectation that this should be adjusted quarterly. And the adjustment type on this final column for income, that's how you spend your time, right? Income can only be adjusted by either putting time towards labor, like getting a job, or through portfolio construction if you're retired. Those are the two things you've got, right? So if you're pre-retired, it's more time to your work or other, part-time work. And if it's post-retirement, it's both labor and portfolio construction. For expenses, it's really just spending behavior. You can only cut expenses by changing spending behaviors and being more mindful of those things. And those are both in your control. How you spend your labor time or how you spend your time and how you do your spending choices, those are both ultimately completely in your control. From there, we move to required portfolio income and the actual distribution rate. Those might not always be matched. You might have an estimate of your required portfolio income at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year, and you might have an entirely different distribution rate as you travel month by month because maybe there's some emergencies that happen or you spend money unanticipated. We track these again monthly, and then we adjust these only quarterly, and it's the same idea. You don't want to make two changes too quickly when things might smooth out over a period of time. And ultimately, both of those things are really only affected by spending behaviors because they're cash flow driven metrics. And if you don't remember, what you should do is go back and watch the assessment video, which is the module 1 video of our NRRZ Navigating the Retirement Risk Zone series. And then ultimately, portfolio income and distribution rate determine what required rate of return you seek from your portfolio. We track that quarterly. We recommend adjusting that quarterly as well. And the two data inputs or adjustment types that can affect this are spending behaviors and portfolio construction. And then you can see here, very close to the bottom of this list is portfolio value, which should be tracked quarterly, but you can see here there's a not applicable of adjustment frequency because truthfully, you shouldn't be making changes based on your portfolio value. If you're tracking the appropriate measures, then you'll have all sorts of leading indicators that will tell you where your portfolio value will go, and you can adjust those properly without using the lagging indicator that is portfolio value to determine what changes you should make. And then below that, and these are not because they're last priority, these are actually very important, but they're often neglected in retirement planning or financial planning, are two measures of satisfaction. These are emotional measures, financial satisfaction and life satisfaction. And these should be tracked because your finances will dictate how much anxiety you have, and how much anxiety you have will dictate how satisfied you are and happy you are with the way you're living your life in retirement, especially with the changes that come as you lead into retirement. And these should be tracked semi-annually, and you should be thinking about adjusting these. And that's why I brought up earlier, this is, half science and half art. The science is the math and the art is the personal element. If you're not happy with your strategy or your retirement plan and it's giving you perpetual anxiety, that should be changed, right? And if you're not happy with your life, you also need to change things about how that's going. They will inform each other. Anxiety compounds on anxiety. And so these should be really paid attention to closely as part of this overall system. So this brings and winds us down to a close for the Navigating the Retirement Risk Zone series. Again, we've gone through 5 modules. We've set expectations. Again, the principle here is this is like a series of nested decisions. And what you're trying to do is set layers, build a foundation at the beginning that gives you good education, good data, and helps you be decisive as you make your decisions. And then we've set this up with a long-term system of expectations of what you monitor, what you track, and what you should adjust based on those things. Now, obviously, we can't go into infinite detail on this, but hopefully this was helpful. And if you haven't watched the prior videos, you should watch this. It's a playlist on our YouTube channel. You can also go to any form on our website. And if you submit your contact information or your email, really, you will get access to this whole series. Now, as well, if you submit via our website, you will also get access to a couple instructional videos, as well as all of the templates, access to our financial planning tool, and other elements that will help you actually kind of get your feet wet doing this retirement planning activity. So if you're interested in that, please go to our website, fill out any of the forms there, and you'll get those additional videos. You can also watch these entirely free on YouTube, and that's maybe where you're watching it. And if you have questions, comments, or concerns, please leave those in the comment section below this video. If you're watching this via our email chain, please send us an email with any questions, comments, or concerns you have. As always, thank you for your time and attention. I hope you found this entire series helpful and a good use of your time. And if you have suggestions about how we can improve things here, please let me know. We're always trying to improve. Last but not least, if you're not interested in doing all of the heavy lifting of retirement planning yourself, you're more than welcome to reach out to our fee-only fiduciary financial planning team here at Peak Financial Planning. And you can do that from the forms on our website. You can schedule a free consultation there, and we'd be very privileged to speak with you. Thank you for your time and attention. We'll see you in the next video, and I hope you enjoyed the series.